What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my running back rankings. If you missed the QB rankings, that came out a little bit ago now. And now I'm ready to talk about some running backs. I'm going to give you the top 32, at least in my opinion. And this is just my opinion. It's an open discussion, so I'd love to have your thoughts on the running back rankings. Tell me what you think down in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Who are your top 5? Love to have your thoughts on today's topic as well as today's video. If you enjoy it, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, we're getting very close to 100 subs. We're at 87 at the time me recording this, and I'm going to have a giveaway on the channel, $25 gift card. All you got to do is subscribe, comment on that video, but help us get to 100 subs by hitting that big red subscribe button. So let's go ahead and start talking about these rankings. I will say not every team has a name on this list, and actually a couple teams have 2 different running backs on here. So top 32 running backs, let's jump right into it with name number 32, Jamal Williams. I'm actually a big Jamal Williams fan. I wish he had a backfield to his own. This is kind of an interesting Detroit backfield, right? I used to think Kerryon Johnson could be, the lead back. I don't know about a workhorse or anything like that, but I used to think of him highly enough to be the lead back, and then they draft DeAndre Swift, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, but Jamal Williams brings a nice balanced skill set, and him and Swift together, I think are going to be the MO of that Detroit offense. They're going to try to run the ball first. And also, I should say, this is not me projecting, who has the best season or anything like that. This is just how I see the position. So, Jamal Williams, somebody I'm super high on and still young, getting better. I wish he could have a backfield to himself, however. And a guy who right now, I think, does have a backfield mostly to himself. There is James Conner there in Arizona. He did not make the list. But Chase Edmonds, big play ability and his pass catching skill set makes him a really, really solid running back. Don't know if he'll ever get the chance to be an elite level running back and get that workload, just given his size. And typically your large workload guys are typically your bigger body and ground and pound types, not necessarily all the time, but I just don't know with Edmonds' frame and skill set that he'll ever turn into that guy you can have on the field 3 downs in a row or anything like that. But I still like Edmonds' skill set. And primarily a guy who can run outside the tackles, use his speed to his advantage, and again, fantastic pass catcher. And that really fits well for that Arizona offense. Then we get to Melvin Gordon at number 30. I mean, he's still a really solid running back. Balanced skill set, absorbs contact really well. He's starting to get up there in age, also had some off-the-field issues. So that holds him back just a little bit, I guess you could say. But more so his age, and there's a guy obviously in the same column just above him that I think will take over that starting running back role, and I like Javonte Williams just a little bit more given where these two players are at in their career. But that's not to say Melvin Gordon can't be a starting running back. I mean, all 32 of these names, in my opinion, are starting caliber running backs. It's everybody who didn't make the list, in my opinion, that would become RB2s depending on the situation they're in. All these guys you'll hear me talk about, in my opinion, are starting caliber guys. Nonetheless, let's talk about Ronald Jones at number 29. Wish this guy was a better pass catcher, because otherwise he'd definitely move up the list. He has big playability. Remember, he had the 98-yard rushing touchdown midway through last year. I remember what week it was off the top of my head. I apologize for that. But guy has explosive abilities, and he has that big power skill set. He's got that good blend between being able to break off a big run, but also 3rd and 2, you can hand it off to the guy, and he can be able to move the chains. In those power back situations. They also have Leonard Fournette for that type of situation, so you won't always get to showcase that ability, but it's not like he's weak. He's obviously a better power runner than someone like Chase Edmonds, and that's largely due to his frame and his strength. But the one thing that holds Ronald Jones back is he's just objectively not a very good pass catcher. But, Tampa Bay signs Gio Bernard, and they have an abundance of wide receivers and tight ends, so I guess they don't really need Ronald Jones to be an elite pass catcher. Travis Etienne checks in at number 20. This was a tough one. How do you weigh that Jacksonville backfield? Also, is Etienne playing running back? I know a lot of times in the mini camp, there was a lot of coverage of him playing wide receiver. That's also due to Trevor Lawrence not being able to throw yet. So, why have him taking, handoffs from someone who's not Trevor Lawrence? And additionally, he's been playing running back his whole life. It's an opportunity to add a different skill set. So I don't think it's really that outlandish for what Urban Meyer was trying to do. It's not the craziest move that he's made, not the biggest headline he's been able to capture, but Etienne, if he improves as a pass catcher, who is already a solid option out of the backfield coming out of Clemson, that makes him that much more intriguing. Plus, he has that big play explosive nature. You counter that with James Robinson, who's a pure power runner. Not going to break off these egregious 80-yard runs or anything like that, but he's solid. He's consistent. I should say, if I were ever in a position to make an NFL team or anything like that, I prefer running backs like that, where I just know I'm going to be able to hand off 4 or 5 yards what I'm going to get in return. I don't necessarily need an 80-yard gain, even though I'd love to get that big play touchdown, but I'm in that Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott. Those are like my guys I would want in my offense, and then have an explosive passing attack, like, something like Kansas City. Again, this is all like theoretical and what I would ideally like and how I try to build an offense. That's not how it always plays out, and obviously I'm not an NFL GM, so my opinion matters very little in that regard. But ETN, super talented guy. I'm interested to see how Jacksonville uses him, and also running back is a position that it's not crazy to see running backs making, or rookies I should say, make an immediate impact, so I want to see if ETN's able to do that. Then we'll talk about Damian Harris here at 27. And I'm all in on the Damian Harris hype train for fantasy football. I might do some fantasy rankings once we get close to the NFL season. But Sony Michel, I said this a while back, but now it's looking more so this way that Michel could be a good cut candidate or a trade possibility for New England. And that makes it a backfield of Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, who I'm a big fan of Ramondre Stevenson too. But, 4th round guy for a reason. Great offensive line ahead of Harris. It's a team that's going to want to run the football, whether it's Cam Newton or Mac Jones under center. All this is pointing in a direction where Damian Harris could really emerge into that, I don't know, depending on how big your league is, he could potentially be an RB1, but if not, high-end RB2 in my opinion. I think he has that ceiling. Additionally, he looked fantastic down the stretch last year, so it's not just he's in a good situation and there's going to be enough volume. He's a talented guy, but going to his volume, if he's the guy getting most of the carries and he's the power back, like he's the goal line guy, there's a whole lot to like there for Harris's situation. A lot of times you'll see, workhorse guys or like the leader of the committee not be the guy who gets the goal line touches. And that can be tough because then you have to weigh the value of workload versus touchdown potential. Harris ideally has both of that. The only person who might throw a wrench into that is Cam Newton, who last year had 12 rushing touchdowns and obviously didn't start every game. So whether Cam's the starter or not, I think Cam will be used in those goal-to-go situations, which could hurt Harris's value. But nonetheless, I am really intrigued by Harris in a first full season as the starter, assuming they do move on from Sony Michel, behind a great offensive line. I think he could really fly up this list in about a year's time. And then we'll talk about another rookie here in Javonte Williams. I love his skill set. He put together a strong argument to be running back 1 in the draft rankings, and in my opinion, I had him at running back 2 right behind Najee Harris, we'll talk about here in just a moment. But this dude absorbs contact like no other, has great change of direction skills, maybe not quite as good of a one-cut as his UNC teammate Michael Carter, but he can still stop and start on a dime, and ability to break tackles. PFF loves this guy in that regards. Most missed tackles per rushing attempt. I mean, this guy set a PFF record there, so if you buy into their numbers, this is a guy you should like. And for me, I buy into those numbers in this situation. I think Javonte Williams, maybe not immediately the starter in Denver, but eventually takes over that starting gig. They'll move on from Melvin Gordon. Also Mike Boone in that backfield, who I think he's pretty solid. He's just kind of buried on the Minnesota depth chart behind guys like Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison. But now an opportunity, especially maybe next year if they do move on from Gordon, 1-2 punch of Williams and Boone could be really scary. But regardless, talking about Williams here, really like what he could bring to this offense, especially if they don't get Aaron Rodgers, right? Like if it's Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, this is going to be a run first, set up the play action based offense. Try to get the ball in the hands of Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, KJ Hamler after establishing the run and, creeping those linebackers close to the line of scrimmage, forcing safeties to play towards the box, trying to set up situations where defenses have to go single high and put a safety in the box, and that makes it all the easier for Sutton, Jeudy, Hamler, Fant, all the guys I just said. So I think Javonte Williams could be potentially in line for a big workload and obviously great touchdown potential, as I think he has that ability to be a really good goal line back. And Tony Pollard here at 25. This is a name that is getting a lot of buzz this offseason. And it's interesting to think about if Dallas wanted to trade one of these two running backs, Zeke or Tony Pollard, tell me which one you think would give them better value in return. That Zeke contract really bogs down what they could potentially get in a trade. I'm not saying they're going to move on from either one of them, but it's just interesting thought experience. Who would actually net you better value? Intriguing. Tony Pollard, a good young guy, and that big playability. Just something that, again, I favor somebody like Zeke where it's, 4 or 5 yards a pop. But Tony Pollard knows how to break off those big gains. And when Zeke wasn't on the field and Pollard got opportunities to be the lead back, he looked really good last year. And this is not behind the same offensive line that Zeke had when he was a rookie. Or you go back even further, DeMarco Murray. And it was flirting with 2,000 rushing yards in a season behind one of the best offensive lines in modern football history. Pollard has a good offensive line ahead of him. But no Lyle Collins, no Tyron Smith. It was really like Zach Martin and then a group of just dudes out there. So Tony Pollard looking good in that. Says a lot about his talent and his skill set and a good young running back. It's interesting to see what Dallas is going to do managing the workload between Zeke and Tony Pollard. And kind of a similar running back, DeAndre Swift here. Again, one of those guys who more of a scat back of sorts, big playability. But DeAndre Swift's ability to be the pass catcher. I mean, talking about pure talent, he's probably top 3 pass catchers on this team. And I mean, maybe I'm just totally asleep on Tyrell Williams' ability to stay healthy. And I think Brashad Perriman pats his stats in the last 4 weeks of the year every time he gets an opportunity with an NFL team. But TJ Hawkinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift might be the 3 most talented pass catchers on this team, at least long term. Those are the guys they're going to try to build an offense with, not around, but with. I don't think any of those guys are like game changers, but regardless, DeAndre Swift's ability to catch the football out of the backfield will help Jared Goff make the game a little easier for him, right? Those nice, easy, simple checkdowns. Also, Swift is a good route runner, so you could flirt with the idea of using him in the slot. Not quite the level that like Carolina can use Christian McCaffrey or New Orleans uses Alvin Kamara, but poor man's version, you kind of get that with DeAndre Swift. On to Najee Harris at 23. This is such an interesting experiment that Pittsburgh has on their hands. They go running back in the first round. This is like an opportunity to try to dispel that notion that running backs can't be taken in round 1. But generally speaking, numbers suggest that you can wait to find a running back as good or maybe even better later on. Additionally, it's an opportunity to weigh the true value of offensive line versus running back talent. How much of a difference does a weak offensive line have on a good talented running back versus a good running back boosting the play of maybe a so-so offensive line in front of him? What works for Harris, though, is the interior for Pittsburgh does look okay. They also just had a meeting with Try Turner, so we'll see what that turns into. But regardless, Kevin Dotson looked really good at left guard. I think Kendrick Green, day 1 starter probably at center, and he was one of the best run blockers in college football. Needs to work on his pass protection, but as a run blocker, he could pave the way for Najee Harris. And then David Castro is still a Pro Bowl, All-Pro level right guard, getting older, but still playing at a high level. So the interior, where Najee Harris really will make his money, is not too bad. It's the tackle spots that are worrisome, and that more reflects on the passing game. So I think the interior offensive line is good enough for Harris to have some success, and he's also a guy who's a great pass catcher. He can get that goal line work. I mean, this is a guy that I think it'll be few and far between when he leaves the field, honestly, just because of how balanced of a skill set he has. Not going to break off any 70, 80-yard rushing touchdowns, more than likely. At least not without breaking like 7 tackles along the way, but a guy that definitely has RB1 type of potential, and I think he immediately has that role locked up despite being rookie. And we talk about James Robinson. Kind of talked about him a little bit earlier when we talked about Travis Etienne, but I favor a running back like James Robinson where it's just like solid, consistent. May not be anything big, crazy about his running style, but he's going to get you consistent progress, and that's something that is appealing to me. Also, he is going into year 2, so despite rookie running backs can't have an immediate impact, Robinson's already more acclimated with the game speed of the NFL compared to someone like Travis Etienne, though Robinson doesn't have the pass-catching upside or the big playability that Etienne presents. So in other people's rankings, you could totally see these two flip-flop, and I wouldn't argue with it. It just comes down to your preference and what you see in running back. I just tend to like a guy built like James Robinson, and awesome success story last year. UDFA becomes, statistically speaking, the most successful rookie running back in the NFL. That's pretty awesome. A guy who was a rookie last year, J.K. Dobbins, comes in at 21, and this is another name I would suspect flies up the board. He has it tough, kind of like what we talked about with Damian Harris, where the QB eats into your rushing production. But you also have Gus Edwards and then, of course, Lamar Jackson kind of eating away at J.K. Dobbins. But once Dobbins became the lead running back last year, he looked really good. And, that's why you see Mark Ingram not returning to Baltimore, right? Like, Dobbins is the guy of the future for Baltimore, at least the lead guy of the future. Gus Edwards is also a really solid running back. It was kind of tough to not have him on this list. I almost thought about expanding it out to 40 running backs, but decided to keep it consistent with the QB rankings with 32 names. But I do like Dobbins a lot. Super talented guy, great pass catcher, has that RB1 skill set, and now going into year 2, I think he'll have the workload to be able to move up because he's definitely a more talented player than running back 21. On to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We're getting into a string here of second-year running backs. And CEH, first couple weeks of the year, had him on my fantasy team, and my big fantasy, pay a lot of money to be in it, league, the one that I care the most about. He was my first-round pick, and I was over the moon with his production over the first 3 weeks. What was a little concerning was his goal line production. Through those first 3 weeks, had like 6 carries at the goal line for like negative yardage, which obviously not great. But I think that's an area where he can improve. And additionally, the Kansas City offensive line really wasn't built to be goal line based in a lot of ways, to pound the football in short yardage. Le'Veon Bell did not have high success rate in that situation. Darrell Williams didn't either. So more of a team issue more than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Also, CEH as a pass catcher, I think they're going to rely on him a lot more this year. You have Tyreek Hill, you have Travis Kelce. Those guys are studs, but Marcus Robinson has, not impressed once given the opportunity. He's coming back, though. Cornell Powell. What kind of an impact can you expect from a rookie 5th-round wide receiver? A deep wide receiver class, so that makes you think that Powell might have a shot to be really productive right away, but I think CEH has the potential to fill in and get some slot roles. They'll use him out of the backfield a ton as a pass catcher, on top of, we saw last year, he's a very elusive bowling ball. He has a good blend of being able to lower the shoulder, run through somebody, pick up a few yards that way, but also he's so shifty and can make so many defenders miss. He has a nice skill set. Then you add in the pass catching element, another guy who could certainly fly up the list from number 20. Then we talk about Miles Sanders. I'm interested to see what his role looks like with the addition of Kenneth Gainwell being drafted by Philadelphia. Does that eat into the pass catching production for Miles Sanders? But Sanders is as steady as it gets. I don't think there's any one area to his game that you look at and you say, Miles Sanders is the best running back in the NFL at this. He's elite in this category. But man, he is just like a B to B plus level player across the board. He'll make guys miss. He has some power to him. He has good enough speed. Can catch the football. Decent pass protector. He just does everything really well. And that's why he comes in here at 19. Though I am intrigued by the addition of Kenneth Gainwell and see how that eats into Miles Sanders' production in the passing game. On to Kareem Hunt at number 18. And this one feels really low to me because when we last saw him as a starting running back in Kansas City, he's probably a top 5 back in the NFL. He looked fantastic, and he still does. He just doesn't have as big of a workload to shine and put on numbers that would make you think this guy's top 5 still, or even top 10. So talent-wise, he's probably higher than 18, but I've been saying that about a lot of guys. Kind of a deep running back time for the NFL. I said that about the QBs, but obviously running backs, we see a lot of different teams moving towards committees because you can have 2-3 good running backs on a team, and they all could be starting caliber guys in another situation. And Kareem Hunt on another team is more than just a starter. He's a plus level starter. He's a potential top 10 guy. So tough to try to locate where he goes, but with a smaller sample size, it's harder to find moments where he is deserving of being a top 10 guy versus a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, who were just given all the workload they could ever want to showcase their ability. That's not to say that Kareem Hunt is a scrub by any stretch of the imagination. He's fantastic, and probably somebody that I feel like I could get some feedback on, and probably will, given that he's probably deserving of being higher than number 18. But tell me where you would have Kareem Hunt. I'm interested to see where you think he should be ranked. On Raheem Mostert at number 17, and he's another tough one because numbers, when he's healthy, look really good. But also, how much of that is the Kyle Shanahan system? It feels like Raheem Mostert is like a match made in heaven for what Shanahan wants to do. Those outside, stretches and zone runs to the outside, and basically lining up blocks to where you have a numbers advantage. And then Mostert with that home run speed, it feels like a perfect situation. I like Raheem Mostert. I've also seen him be able to make guys miss. So 17 might be a little high, and maybe it's just bias, but I really do enjoy watching Raheem Mostert play. Though I have to give a lot of credit to Kyle Shanahan, and also he plays behind a really good offensive line. So, tricky one here back-to-back with Hunt than Mostert, but again, tell me what you think. I still like the home run ability. I mean, Mostert is one of the fastest running backs in the game, and it takes more than just speed to be a home run guy. It takes vision right? It takes, elusiveness, and then Mostert has put both those skill sets on display, and also he's a pretty solid pass catcher, which obviously helps out a ton. Now we're on to the top 16 names on my running back rankings, and obviously once we get to this part, we've already been to this point really, but we're splitting hairs from here on out. This could go in a variety of different ways, but Antonio Gibson at number 16, I loved watching him play last year for Washington. The fact he was a wide receiver before making the transition to play running back, it would be hard to tell, really. When you watch him last year, he looks like a natural running back, but then when you add the pass-catching experience, God, he's just a fantastic dual threat out of the backfield. Love to watch him play. And additionally, hopefully this year Washington moves away from using J.D. McKissick and a lot of those pass-catching formations and those looks that went to McKissick. Hopefully now go to Antonio Gibson. I know fantasy owners of Antonio Gibson would appreciate that. And then Jonathan Taylor at 15. A little bit of a slow start, but he was also bogged down behind, a pass catcher, a fantastic one at that, and Nyheim Hines, and also Marlon Mack, who's more than capable of being a guy on this list. But Jonathan Taylor down the stretch emerged as the best and most talented running back of that group, right? And another one of those guys who just does everything really well. Has good speed, has good power, can make you miss in the hole, can catch the football a little bit, just a really solid balanced skill set, which makes it really hard to take him off the field, given he can do just about anything you ask him to do. Then we get to Austin Eckler at 14, and obviously a little bit different than some of the names ahead of him, and a tough player to weigh just given how good of a pass catcher he is, and how, honestly, in a lot of ways, you can make an argument he might be the best receiving back in the NFL, which is crazy because like Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, but statistically speaking, Eckler puts together an argument to be considered in that top tier group. But running in between the tackles, not necessarily his strength. He's not inefficient, but it's not where his game is best suited. But he has proven to be a pretty solid and efficient runner of the football, has a good yards per carry. But when you get Eckler on the outside, he has a good amount of speed. He can break off a big run or two. I just think he's a really solid runner of the football. Been able to overcome a lot of different things too, but then when you consider how good of a pass catcher he is and how well he fits that Chargers offense with that skill set, it's tough to not have him in the top 16 for running backs in the NFL. Then we get to Cam Akers at 13, and he was among the harder ones to try to place. We talked about Hunt was tough, Raheem Mostert's difficult, but Cam Akers, I remember when he came out of Florida State and he was just stuck behind an abysmal offensive line, and really, if you're going to make an argument that running back play is very dependent upon how the offensive line produces, Cam Akers is your guy, because at Florida State, he was just stuck and, running back hell behind that offensive line, which still to this day is not very good. But then he gets behind, not even necessarily a great group, though the Rams have been able to patch together and they played pretty well across the offensive line last year. And he thrived, especially down the stretch. He had that big playability. He can catch the football, and he showcased the skill set to be an every down back. His vision is fantastic. This guy knows how to find the hole, hits it with a great amount of burst to that big play nature to him. With that vision, it's explosive, and it adds one more element to what's already a very good offense. Now you have Matt Stafford, who can stretch the field a little bit better than Jared Goff. Also think he can read a defense, find that second, third, fourth option better than someone like Goff does. And, Darrell Henderson, no disrespect to him, he's a fine running back. Could be a starter somewhere down the line. But Cam Akers and that big playability adds so much more, fun to watch nature to what's already a very fun to watch team by its nature, given the offensive firepower, but even, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey on the defensive side. So Akers, maybe I have him a little high compared to where you might have him. Let me know down in the comment section. And then Josh Jacobs at 12. Definitely somebody I would have anticipated putting higher, but when he was playing behind a bad offensive line, it's another one of those cases where the offensive line really kind of dictates the running back production. But once that offensive line started to get banged up in Vegas, Josh Jacobs' yards per carry goes down below 3. I think it was at 2.7 towards the end of the season. And obviously not ideal, but one, he does have at least a competent offensive line in front of him. He has good vision, knows how to absorb contact with some of the best running backs in football, knows how to hit a hole 5 yards in a pound of dust, a pile of dust, whatever the expression is. That's his MO. And also, obviously, like I've said with a lot of these guys, really good option in the passing game, which gives you just a nice, well-balanced skill set. The Raiders are still getting flack for taking Jacobs in the first round, and I get it, but they also had an early second-round pick. So what if they had, netted Jacobs at the top of round 2? Would you be giving him all that heat? Not nearly as much. So when you think about it that way, obviously your perception of Jacobs should be more positive, and all he needs is an okay offensive line. He's a running back where I think all running backs really need at least an okay offensive line ahead of him, but some running backs need elite offensive lines ahead of him. Think DeMarco Murray, right? He was playing behind that insane Dallas offensive line we mentioned earlier, and he almost ran for 2,000 yards. Then he goes to Philadelphia, and he's playing behind a far less talented group, and he's, mid at best. He's like a meh running back at his absolute best. So Josh Jacobs is one of those guys, just like every other name ahead of him too. They can get it done with an okay offensive line, but I do hope Jacobs has better play. Alex Leatherwood's going to be ideally a better fit to boost up the run blocking for that offense. That's kind of what his MO was with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Kind of had some concerns about his pass protection, but if he's just going to be a mean run blocker on the right tackle spot, which was a pick that I thought was a little early and many others did too, but if he can be a run grader, then hey, helps out Josh Jacobs and he could move up the list from 12. David Montgomery at 11. And this is a guy that I initially thought was a little overhyped. I remember when he was a rookie and everybody was saying, this is the rookie running back to draft in fantasy. He's going to break out, and it just didn't materialize. Part of that was the one time I really had a big problem with Matt Nagy and his play calling was he just refused to run the football. I remember one time that there was a game where the Bears had 9 carries. This is with Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback, and it's just a misunderstanding of the personnel you have on the field. But down the stretch last year, they turned that around. They did not want Mitch Trubisky throwing the ball. They tried to limit those opportunities to as few as they could, and they fed David Montgomery, and he put up some huge games. I think that carries over into this season. The offensive line on the interior, not too bad. And Tevin Jenkins going to be playing left tackle. He's a really good run blocker. We'll see how big of an impact he can make right away. Typically, rookie tackles can have a hard time unless you're like Tristan Wirfs. But normally, the rule is that rookie tackles struggle. There are exceptions. Maybe Jenkins could be one of those. But I think the interior offensive line will help pave good running lanes for Montgomery, and he could put up easily up and over 1,000-yard season. Could get close to double-digit touchdowns, maybe go up and over that, depending on how efficient this offense is throwing the ball, setting up red zone opportunities, all that fun stuff. Then we get to Chris Carson at 10. And after I made this, I was like, that's too high. But then I look back at it. Chris Carson's like my type of running back, man. He's a pretty good pass blocker, can do some things in the pass game. I remember Brian Schottenheimer year after year was like, we want to get Chris Carson more involved in the pass game, and it just like never really materialized. The big injury, or the big concern with Carson is, well, injuries, as I, kind of spoiled there. But if he's on the field, man, good power runner. One of the few, like, true exclusive power runners that can still be a 3-down guy, given he has good hands. So, rare skill set. I had to put him in the top 10, despite, even after I made this list, I was like, really? Would I prefer Carson over someone like Josh Jacobs? And I think right now, I would. And some of these names that, I think in a year's time, another great year from Cam Akers could definitely, vault him up and over Chris Carson, maybe Jonathan Taylor as well. Antonio Gibson could get in that consideration. So this is a big year for Chris Carson, obviously. Got that contract from Seattle with a void year at the end of it. So he's there for, 2 more seasons if memory serves. So he's going to start having to impress and prove that he's worth the money that the Seahawks gave him, as they're going to continue to be tight on cap. And, if he doesn't play up to that number, they're going to try to move on from him and try to alleviate the money that they owe him and try to find cap rooms to, extend a Jamal Adams type of guy. Ezekiel Elliott at number 9. We talked about Pollard earlier. Ezekiel Elliott is the complete opposite type of running back, where not necessarily going to break off big plays, but knows how to shrug off tackles. Big power running guy, 4 or 5 yards with every touch. Not literally, but that's how it works for him. And I still like Zeke Elliott. I know he's getting paid more than he really deserves. He gets paid a lot because he is one of the better running backs in football. It just comes down to your philosophy. Do you think you should pay a running back? And you can look at Ezekiel Elliott as an example of why you don't. But taking the money aside, you watch Ezekiel Elliott play, I don't think he has all the fumble issues that he had this past season. So once you put that under the rug as well, he's efficient, can catch the football. He just gets the job done. It may not be anything that's like glamorous or super sexy, doesn't have a big highlights per se, but he can get in the end zone once you're at the goal line, get you 4 or 5 yards with every touch, He can catch the football. He's a pretty good pass blocker. He just does a lot of things really, really well. And throw the contract aside. I don't think the fumbles stick, and recognize Ezekiel Elliott is worthy of being a top 10 running back and probably even higher, because there's an argument he should be over guy we have at number 8. I really do like Joe Mixon. I don't think there's a flaw in his game other than he can't stay healthy, which sometimes that comes down to the player and their approach to the game and how well they take care of their body, all that jazz. But Joe Mixon has just gotten some bad luck in that regard as well, and luck is a factor when it comes to injuries. But I really encourage you to try to show me a weakness in Joe Mixon's game. He can block. He can catch football. He can break off big games. May not be super exposed. May not be like Cam Akers' big playability. But you'd be foolish to say that he has no big playability, right? Don't go to one of the extremes and recognize Joe Mixon is such a talented player. He just has got to be able to stay on the football field. And, we'll see how Zach Taylor, does he try to limit the amount of carries he gives Mixon? That might bog down some of his production, but overall, I think he's a super talented running back. And a lot of the same can be said about Aaron Jones. I mean, this is another guy who I think he can run with power. He knows how to make guys miss. He's fantastic catching the football. He really emerged in a lot of ways, kind of Kamara-esque, where when injuries, happened a couple years ago in Green Bay, where it was like Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones as their top 2 pass-catching targets. That says a lot, and I think that's why he's deserving of the 4-year contract Green Bay gave him. Though I know it's a lot of money to pay running back. We just talked about Ezekiel Elliott, and him getting all that money kind of deteriorates what they can do with offensive line depth, defensive line talent, just defensive talent in general in a lot of ways. But I think Jones will be a worthy investment considering what they can get out of him in the passing game, but also you still need running back production, right? And maybe they could have gone with Jamal Williams as a cheaper option. I think there's an argument to be made there because I do like Jamal Williams. But with that said, Aaron Jones has proven to be a very solid, productive running back. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't mess with the core. And also, you already have Aaron Rodgers really upset. If you moved on from Aaron Jones, it might have just been another domino to fall against you. So glad to see Green Bay kept Aaron Jones around. But he's emerged as one of my favorite running backs to watch, which is kind of crazy because a couple of years ago, it wasn't really somebody I really thought of or was on my radar. But year by year, he finds a way to get better and better. And he is a ton of fun to watch. Saquon Barkley comes in at number 6, has the talent to be running back 1. We knew that when he was drafted number 2 overall by the Giants. He is a generational talent type of dude. Obviously, the ACL injury in week 2 last year prevents him from, moving up and getting higher on this list, because if he plays, he's probably higher, especially considering McCaffrey also had injuries last year. So if he's on the football field, great pass catcher, knows how to get open, good route runner for that matter, big playability, can run with power, as elusive as it gets. There's not a hole in Saquon Barkley's game, and he is just one of those guys that I know the Giants get flack for taking him number 2 overall, but not many running backs could even be good enough to be considered to be taken at number 2 overall. And that speaks to the talent that Barkley possesses. He's a generational type of guy. If he's healthy, I wouldn't be surprised in a couple years' time we're talking about him at running back number 1. Christian McCaffrey comes in at number 5. Him and Kamara are one of these 2 guys where you could legitimately line them up at wide receiver, and I don't think you're misusing them. Like, there are good route running backs. Like Saquon Barkley knows how to get open. Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, all the guys basically below McCaffrey can get open and are good route runners. But if you put them at wide receiver, a little bit of an opportunity cost, because they're probably not as good as a wide receiver actually doing, depending on who you have in your wide receiver room. But McCaffrey and Kamara are 2 guys who legitimately, I think you could basically just play in the slot and you'd be fine. So, that said, additionally, Christian McCaffrey has a ton of elusiveness and he has great vision running the football. So, knows how to find the hole, he knows how to make dudes miss, add in an elite level pass production. There's a reason he could be a 1,000 guy, 1,000 on the ground, 1,000 in the air. I mean, he's just a rare skill set. You don't often see it. I mean, now we're starting to see it become a little bit more common. I just listed off a ton of guys who are solid pass catchers and then a guy who's equally good at it in Alvin Kamara. So it's still a rare skill set nonetheless, though it is becoming more and more necessary for running backs in football. But a big reason for that is because of Christian McCaffrey. He has broken through and shown offensive coordinators and coaches and everybody around the game that you can have a guy who's that good of a route runner as a running back. You create mismatches against linebackers. You can also throw him out in the slot and really give headaches to safeties who might try to match up with them, slot corners even. So McCaffrey and Kamara, those guys have broken the mold. I give the edge to Kamara, and he's at 3 because I think he's just a better in between the tackles runner. But that's not to say McCaffrey is a scrub in that area. Then we get to Nick Chubb at 4, and man, this is going to sound super lame, but it's hard to describe how good Nick Chubb is. And I mean, there's a lot of really good running backs in the NFL right now. Like, everybody on this list is running back 1, and it's really funny. If you could just drop them back like 10 years ago, they'd all probably respectively be higher on the list. But dude, Nick Chubb just gets the job done. He's just one of those guys that I like to watch, knows how to get 5 yards at a time, but also has that big play ability. I think back to the game against the Texans this past year where 10-7, really ugly game, but then he breaks off this huge run, steps out of bounds at the 1 so they could take a knee. Fantasy owners were going crazy. Nick Chubb, I needed that touchdown, but he has that rare blend to just be a power back. He'll wear down the defense over the course of a game, but then also he could just go for 80 yards and you don't like bat an eyelash at it because it's Nick Chubb. Maybe not the best pass catcher, and that's why Kareem Hunt is more so used in that role, but I don't think Chubb is a weakness, a liability out there in passing situations by any stretch of the imagination. So I hate to say it because I'm a Steelers fan, but Nick Chubb is by far one of the best running backs in football, and just a really interesting skill set given that power and speed, big play ability. It's not a blend you often see, but obviously here at the top of the list you will see it relatively frequently. Alvin Kamara at number 3, easily a guy you can make an argument who is the most talented running back in football, given how good of a pass catcher, we talked about that with McCaffrey, how good of a route runner, how good he is just as a passing option. Additionally, he's got 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns on Christmas Day, whatever it was. This dude can finish at the goal line. He can run between the tackles. You can also get him outside. He has big play, speed, and explosiveness to his game. Another one of those guys where not only is there no weakness, there's nothing below, say, plus level skill. Like, there's not a asset on the board other than we're talking about like throwing the football. You know, anything you could ask a running back to do, he does an above average level minimum. Like, this guy is just a freak. Also just has so much swag. Like, when it comes down to just being decked out and looking dope while being sick and being really good at your position, Alvin Kamara is that dude. Like, all swagger team when it comes to the NFL. Then we get to Dalvin Cook. Big play, home run guy. This is just one of those dudes who year after year has just gotten better and better. He knows he has the vision to hit the hole, see the hole, has the explosiveness to hit the hole quickly, and then has the elusiveness to make dudes miss once he's past the hole. I mean, if you're going to have an elusive type back, that's what you want. You want it to look like Dalvin Cook, and obviously he busted out on the scene. He was already really good, but he stayed healthy for the majority of last year and put it all together and had an insane season. Fantasy owners really worried about taking, Dalvin Cook given his injury history, but it definitely paid off. And again, it comes down, you could legitimately have him number 1. I think the Goat House, if you're a fan of my channel and you don't watch the Goat House, I will make sure that's somewhere here on the screen because he's also a great football mind. Here to talk about how he breaks down the game, but he had Dalvin Cook at 1 and Derrick Henry a little bit lower, maybe at 2, maybe at 3. But it comes down to preference, right? Like, if you want a home run guy, Dalvin Cook's your running back 1. I have Derrick Henry at number 1 because, again, I favor those guys who I just know I'm going to hand them the football 4 or 5 yards at a time. But additionally, Derrick Henry, cross-board analogy here, and if you're not a baseball fan, this might not land, but Prince Fielder was one of these guys who played for Brewers, played for a few other teams as well, the Tigers, but big power hitter and big dude in general. But once he got going, he could actually book it. He had some speed. And Derrick Henry is the exact same way, obviously to a little bit lesser of an extreme and with football, but you give him 4 yards because he plays behind a good offensive line. He's a power back. But then once he hits his top speed, this dude can break off 90-yard runs to win a game in overtime, like we've seen him do on a couple of occasions. So, to me, great skill set. Won't necessarily scare you in the passing game, but again, he can catch the football. It's not like Ronald Jones bad, but it's not Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, Kamara level good. Like, he's somewhere there in that league average middle. And then you add that on top of being the best power back in football and being unstoppable within a 5-yard range of the goal line. I mean, it's just not fair. And once he gets to his top speed, he can break off as long a run as you need him to. I mean, that's a complete back. And I think a complete back is kind of an overrated term, but Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, those guys have it, and that's why I think all 3 of those legitimately have an argument to be RB1. I have it as Henry, but I'd love to have your thoughts. Who's your running back 1? Tell me down in the comments section. Tell me who I have too high, who do I have too low. Tell me, give me an argument where I should move these guys around. I'd love to have that conversation with you. I respond to every comment down in the comments section. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel and want to help us get to 100 subs and want more sports content like this in your life, please consider subscribing. That's all I got for you. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.